So, over the past few days, there has been a ton of very exciting Witcher 4 and Witcher 1 Remake news. From pretty clear discussion directly from CDPR as to when Witcher 4 is going to come out, to an update on Geralt's involvement in the game, to, well, there's no reason to list everything because we're going to get to it. There is just a ton to cover, and most of this info has flown completely under the radar, so I want to hit everything. Now, just to get this out of the way, the one thing I'm sure most of you are aware of is that the game director on Witcher 4, or what people are calling The Witcher 4 because we don't actually have a title yet, just the project's codename, which is Polaris. But anyway, the game director on Polaris announced last week that the game had finally entered full-scale production. And as was clarified in a long earnings call CDPR held for investors, they had actually entered full production on Witcher 4 many weeks before that announcement was made, so full production really started 2 or 3 months ago. Now, that initial announcement did come with a very interesting image of a coin that I want to dive into the meaning of in a second. I think I have a pretty interesting match from something CDPR released way back in 2022. But first, I want to address all of you who are maybe thinking, wait, CDPR are only entering full production now? Does that mean Polaris is 5 or 6 years away? And before you panic, if you're the type to panic, the answer is a definite no. For one, keep in mind that The Witcher 3 went through its complete pre-production and full production phase combined in just 3 years with a much smaller team. Polaris currently has 400 devs working on it compared to Witcher 3's 250-ish. But more importantly, this week CDPR directly addressed when Polaris would come out. On that very same earnings call, CDPR CEO said that the development of Polaris would take 5 to 6 years from the very moment the game was conceptualized. So not from when it entered full development, not even from when they announced Polaris back at the start of 2022 when it was already in pre-production, but instead, as the CEO put it, 5 to 6 years from the moment 2 people walked into a room and said, hey, let's make the next Witcher game. Now, as you probably would be able to guess, the rest of the earnings call, particularly the Q&A section, was spent with various investors desperately trying to get an answer as to when exactly that next Witcher game conversation happened, and the CEO kept refusing to answer because, as he said, answering would spoil when they're planning for Polaris to come out. Now, that said, in my opinion, knowing what we do, there's not much of a mystery there anymore anyway, because the very latest that conversation could have happened would be 2021, because Polaris was announced at the start of 2022, and the earliest that conversation could have happened would realistically be 2020, because if you go any further back than based on his timeline of 5 to 6 years, Polaris would be coming out right now, or next year at the latest, and considering the game has only semi-recently entered full production, 2025 surely would be impossible. No, it seems like CDPR are aiming for Polaris to drop in 2026, or maybe 7 at the latest, which lines right up with the massive profit increase they said they're expecting during those years, which I have to stress wouldn't be possible without some sort of major release. On this call, CDPR said they're expecting to gross $4 billion in the next few years, and when asked to explain why they expect such a massive surge in revenue, the CEO said that they have major events planned over the next year that will move them towards that number. To me, that screams reveal trailer soon, marketing campaign ramping up soon. And it's also worth pointing out that in an interview with Eurogamer just a couple of days ago, CDPR, more specifically their CEO again, mentioned that for Polaris they adopted a new strategy where they spent much more time on pre-production than usual to make sure everything was ready before moving forward to avoid another cyberpunk situation. As part of that new strategy, a ton was done before full production was given the green light. The game's story and characters were fully written, the main mechanics of the game have all been developed, and the devs have also put together an apparently large playable portion of Polaris to prove that all of their ideas for game systems and such work as expected. This game is real, and as stupid as that sounds, I don't know why, but Polaris almost didn't feel real to me before hearing all of this. It felt like a game so far out that it wasn't worth thinking or talking about yet. But now, before we move on to the talk of Geralt and Polaris and get into what that coin really means, I just have to say that it's pretty cool that we Witcher fans are exiting a long drought. It's been almost 10 years since The Witcher 3. And while it would have been nice if like a TV show covering the books or something had come out between then and now, sadly that never happened, no TV show exists, but personally I'm just excited to see what CDPR have been cooking, and between Polaris and The Witcher 1 remake that we also have some news on today, it's a good time to be a Witcher fan, I think. Now, before we get into the other news of the day, I do need to take a quick second to thank today's sponsor, one I'm pretty excited about, War Thunder, which, if you don't know, is a completely free-to-play multiplayer action game where you'll engage in military battles on land, air, and sea. After playing War Thunder for several hours, I can tell you that this game is all about capturing the sheer scale and intensity of military conflicts, and however you want to play, you can. Whether you want to break through the front line in a tank, provide air support from a helicopter, or just go all in on naval combat, War Thunder has you covered, and the different vehicle types all interact with each other in War Thunder's large-scale game modes. The game also just rolled out its long-awaited Firebirds update, which added full ray tracing support as well as a ton of other graphical improvements. And even more exciting, the new update brings the F-117 stealth aircraft to War Thunder for the very first time. Anyway, if interested, you can download War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox by using the link in the description. And all new players, as well as those who haven't played War Thunder for half a year or more, will receive 100,000 Silver Lions, a special Eagle of Valor decorator, and even more. War Thunder Mobile, which is an epic multiplayer mobile action game, is also available. You can download and play it for free on iOS or Android using the link in the description. Okay, to move on, and before we get back to that coin, we have kind of a bombshell to get out of the way quick, and this one is especially newsworthy if you're invested at all in Geralt as a character and want to know what's next for him, if anything. So you may remember that in my last video we talked about how Geralt's voice actor, Doug Cockle, had said in a very recent interview that Geralt would be returning in The Witcher 4/Polaris, just not as the main character. And it's important to point out that Doug said that very confidently, in a tone that made it seem like he thought it was common knowledge that Geralt would be back, that what he was saying wasn't even news.
What we know is that Geralt will be part of the game, we just don't know how much, and the game won't focus on Geralt, so it's not about him this time. We don't know who it's about.
Now, as you would expect, pretty much every major news outlet ran with that interview. Headlines of Geralt returning were absolutely everywhere, but I was pretty skeptical in my coverage, mostly because what Doug said about Geralt coming back matched up very closely with an old quote from a single dev from CDPR, a dev who doesn't even work there anymore, by the way. But this former CDPR dev had said years ago when he was at the company that Geralt could potentially return in a future game, just not as the main character. As you can probably imagine, because it's unfortunately the world we live in, but that one quote to this day still gets turned into a new article like every month about Geralt for sure coming back, and I really wondered if Doug had just seen one or two of those articles in passing, and because of them thought that Geralt returning as a side character was something officially announced that everyone knew about. That seemed like the most likely scenario to me, and at this point you can probably guess where I'm going with this, but as it turns out, that's exactly what happened. Because just a couple of days ago, Doug was asked about him supposedly confirming Geralt's return as a side character, and this is what he had to say.
I don't know how true it is. I went off a rumor. I thought I'd seen somebody from CD Projekt say that Geralt will be in Witcher 4, but he won't be the main character. I don't actually know if that's true now, but I think it might be from a really, really old statement that somebody who no longer works for CD Projekt actually put out about 3 years ago. So Witcher 4 is a complete mystery to me. I actually don't know.
Now, that's not to say Geralt 100% won't be back for Polaris, I mean, who knows, but nothing about Doug confidently confirming Geralt's return 8 minutes into a random interview made any sense to me. Either way, we will be seeing Geralt again relatively soon in the Witcher 1 remake that's being worked on, which, by the way, CDPR did give an update for in that earnings call. They said it's progressing well, and they also gave a more detailed update on Project Sirius, which is the Witcher multiplayer spin-off that's being developed in Boston. We know very, very little about that one other than it's apparently a smaller project, but CDPR did say they're currently increasing the number of devs working on Sirius. They're at 42 right now, and they projected that by the end of next year, that number will have doubled. Now, to wrap this video up, let's get to something slightly controversial and then finish with the coin talk. This part isn't news exactly, but something I've seen a lot of people saying since Witcher 4 talk has ramped up is that very few or none of the developers on Polaris had anything to do with the previous Witcher games, that Witcher 4 is another Dragon Age the Veilguard situation. I would just like to point out that if you've been hearing that, it's not true, and it's especially not true with the most important positions. A lead writer has been around since Witcher 2 and was the lead writer on Witcher 2. The story director was a writer on Witcher 3. The art director has been working on Witcher since Witcher 1, same with another art director on the project. The lore master was a quest designer on Witcher 3, and the list goes on and on. I mean, the game director on Polaris that was mentioned earlier has been with CDPR for over a decade, worked on Witcher 3, and was a director on Blood and Wine. Plus, that's not even to mention that multiple very important Witcher devs who have left CDPR are now working at Fool's Theory, the studio that's putting together the Witcher 1 remake. That's not to say all the senior devs on Polaris are still the same talent from 2013, 2014 when Witcher 3 was being developed, but Of course that's the case, it's been over a decade, but people who are claiming Polaris is being made by people who had nothing to do with what made Witcher 3 great, well, they're just lying to you, and I wanted to put that out there. Plus, Phantom Liberty came out just last year, and for me at least, that expansion was pretty convincing as to CDPR still having it. Was it as good as Hearts of Stone? No, but Hearts of Stone is my favorite, well, anything ever, so that's an impossible bar to clear. Okay, anyway, finally, let's talk about that Polaris coin that was revealed. I will say, I think it's worth mentioning that more and more devs each day really since that initial announcement of Polaris being in full production have been teasing different pictures of that coin, and what I've noticed is that most of them are on the cinematic team at CDPR, which again, really makes me wonder if a cinematic teaser is imminent. They are pushing these coins and the mystery of the other side so hard, and it would be strange if they're doing this with no intention of showing anything else for months and months, but I guess we'll see. The Game Awards are next Thursday, so hey, maybe. Anyway, there have been several theories floating around the Witcher community about the coin, two of which I think maybe have potential merit. As you can tell on this coin, we appear to see a mountainside with some sort of entrance, and above the mountain is an eclipse, or what appears to be an eclipse, or potentially the conjunction. We'll get back to the conjunction and what that is if you don't remember, but if it's an eclipse on the coin, then as a Witcher fan, your mind probably jumps straight to the Curse of the Black Sun. If you don't remember what that is, in the Witcher universe, a specific eclipse was prophesied to have cursed 60 different women, many of them royalty. Syanna from Blood and Wine was one of those women, Renfri from the books is another, and Daedra from The Witcher 1 is yet another, plus there have been a few others. Point is, the Curse of the Black Sun is something that, in my opinion, has been given a ton of attention. CDPR have more or less retold the story from the books twice now, including in the main story of the final expansion to the most recent Witcher game, so I'd be surprised if they go back to that well again in any major capacity. I mean, they're remaking Witcher 1 right now, and I'd assume with it the Black Sun quest from that game, so to me, that's a story that doesn't need yet another revisit. We've done the Black Sun thing many times, and the conjunction idea anyway is one I find a lot more compelling. If you're not aware, the conjunction of the spheres was to keep it really simple, a clashing of realms that brought magic and monsters into the world of The Witcher, and led to the need for Witchers in the first place. The first conjunction happened over 1500 years before the games, but a second one started occurring at the very end of Witcher 3. Ciri did end up stopping that second one from completing, but it did begin and more monsters were able to slip into the Witcher world, though we have very little information on how many or what the consequences of that partial second conjunction were. To get back to the coin though, this orb in the sky, partially covered by another orb, sure seems like it could be meant to represent one of the conjunctions, and the mountain with an entrance below the orbs looks very similar to something CDPR have already shown off in Gwent, the standalone game. If you don't know, towards the end of Gwent being updated and supported, they've since stopped, but they did a huge Way of the Witcher expansion. It featured tons of Witchers from long in the past when Witchering was at its peak, and the logo for the expansion featured a bunch of mountains with entrances carved into them. It's not an exact match to the coin, if there is a connection having it match up 1-to-1 would be too obvious anyway, but I think it's worth pointing out. To me, it just seems very likely that Polaris is going to explore the history of Witchers in some capacity, either by taking us back to their peak, or by looking into the past in a follow-up to Witcher 3. Those coins I really don't think are meant to be currency, and if there's something you actually see in-game and they're not just like a team souvenir for CDPR, I would guess they're going to signify membership to something, a Witcher's Guild or similar. Anyway, that is all for today. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more Witcher 4 coverage, I'd definitely appreciate it if you could leave this video a like. It really helps my content get out there. And similarly, if you want Witcher content in your sub box, this is a pretty good place to subscribe, I'd say. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons for their continued support. And for now, that's all. See ya.